Hello everyone, welcome to MissionCentral and welcome to the seminar today called Loving God and Loving Creation. My name's David Anderson and I'm really grateful for the team at MissionCentral for making all of this possible, and grateful to those of you joining online this morning. I'm pre-taping this, it's about 1 week ahead, so that I can actually be present during the seminar in the chat function. So as you're hearing me today, please participate and ask questions and engage the chat function, and we will catch up with you in the question and answer towards the end of our time. And also grateful for my colleague Samuel Chu, who's going to be hosting. In the next 48 minutes or so, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit, tell you who I am, why I'm here, and what I'm not up to when I'm giving presentations. I'd like to give a quick overview of some of the biblical story as it relates to loving God and loving creation. And I hope to demonstrate, and I know many of you will be on this page, that those two things are inextricably linked in the biblical story. And I'd like to place some of that alongside what we're experiencing in the world today. So climate extremes, and we've had much of that in this last year. Species extinction, rising populations. And who I am, looking at the biblical story, is going to take us to two questions that I want to ask us to explore. And that is, in closing, we're going to look at who are we in light of this biblical story? That's an identity question. And the second question following that, out of who we are, then what are we to do? What does Christian practice and ethics look like? But the identity question needs to precede the what do we do question, as I hope comes clear. And I hope, along with you prayerfully, that we do all of this in a spirit of following our Lord Jesus and with hope in the Spirit's presence in our conversation today. And we'll close with at least 10 minutes for some question and answer through the chat function. So first, a quick introduction for those that I've not had the pleasure to meet. My wife Shauna and I are directors of Rocha Canada's work in BC. Rocha, for those that don't know, is an international Christian nature conservation charity. We're working in about 20 countries right now, working to show God's love for all creation. So people and places. We're passionate about local community making and also passionate about caring for the ecosystems and the places around us. And Rocha works that out. Rocha, by the way, means the rock in Portuguese. And here's a little nod to Portuguese pottery from our beginnings in the early 80s in Portugal. Rocha works out our mission in tremendously diverse ways all around the world. But in my case, that looks like my wife and I running a 27-acre environmental center in Surrey, BC, in Metro Vancouver. So think organic farm meets a giant outdoor classroom, because we do an enormous amount of environmental education from preschool up to senior citizens, meets conservation biologists that are studying and restoring degraded habitat and species at risk, meets small retreat center where we offer prayer retreats and spiritual direction and all kinds of community making initiatives. We've been at that for 12 years. So that's a little bit about what we're doing now. Prior to that, I was a pastor, pastoring a small congregation on Bowen Island, which were wonderful years, and my wife Shauna was practicing law during that time. We have 5 kids, 4 of whom are with us living. Our older kids are 20 and 18. We lost our daughter Taya 5 years ago in 2016 when she was 10 years old, after a 1.5 year long fight with a really aggressive leukemia. And more recently, we've adopted 2 younger kids out of the foster care system into our family. I reference that because a bit later, we're going to look at Romans 8. And I want to say at the outset that when I'm speaking about creation and the brokenness of creation and suffering and the Spirit's groaning for renewal of creation, I'm not speaking from an abstract place. I'm speaking from a place of that knows suffering and that knows the hope that we hold to in Christ. yeah, that's just informed our story a lot, and I want to bring that forward as we look at this. So let's look at some orienting biblical passages that reveal for us some of the Creator's heart and intent. And we're going to start at the beginning, of course. Genesis 1. For those of you that want to follow along, there is a handout in the share function on this seminar, and some of the scriptures we're going to be looking at, and some suggestions and resources are there. So Genesis 1 verse 26. Then God said, let us make Adam, humanity, in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created Adam in his own image. In the image of God he created Adam. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. This is familiar to most of us, right? This is foundational stuff. This is the beginning of our story, of the biblical narrative. And in it, our created purpose is really clear. It's revealed. And our purpose is completely relational. We're to live as the physical embodiment of God's image. We bear God's image in our flesh, with the same character, with the same characteristics and virtues and possibilities that our Creator has. And we're to work that out in intimate relationship with our Creator, with one another, and in and to the creation that we're set within. And we're to work those relationships out with a desire for shalom, which is really hard to capture in English, but let's give it a stab, with wholeness, with peacemaking, with integrity and flourishing and goodness and delight. These are all kind of captured in this shalom. And Genesis 2:15 quickly follows. The Lord God took Adam and put them in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So I want to practice something with you. Just when I say creation, for all of those listening, what comes to mind? What do you think of when I say creation? Do you think pristine wilderness, kind of a starry night sky with forest in the background? Do you think of a newborn baby? I ask that just to remind us that biblically, creation is not just the green bits. It's all of us, you and I, in all of this. And it's all of us in all of this, like in our ecosystems, like our forests, our pastures, our rivers, and what we do with our ecosystems, right? Creation is our sidewalks. It's our sewer systems. It's our aquifers and garbage dumps and factories and homes. We have to resist the temptation to think of creation, I think, particularly in these days, as in some kind of romanticized way. Right? Particularly in a time when we're taking ice core samples from the Arctic with microplastics in them. Pristine wilderness really doesn't apply anymore anywhere on the globe. Perhaps it can again. That's what we're going to be talking about later. But just a reminder, creation isn't just the raw earth. It's what we do with the gift of the earth. And the biblical story in this is not idealized. It is unrelentingly realistic. Both about how good creation is, about how broken it is as a result of sin. It's not just sort of inherently broken. It's broken for a reason, and that reason involves our relationship with it. And it's also unrelentingly realistic about how far our Creator goes and is going to save, to heal, and redeem creation. All of us in all of this. Timothy Keller, who some might know, pastor in New York, It says in one of his books, sin is looking to something else besides God for our salvation. It's putting ourselves in the place of God, becoming our own saviors. And if we were to go past Genesis 1 and 2 into Genesis 3, this is the story, right? I will decide what is best, thank you very much. And I will reach out and make a way for myself out of selfish motive and self-autonomy. And I will rebel against all the goodness of God, all the goodness of our Creator. And the implications of our continued claiming autonomy and making a way for ourselves, that kind of sin gets exposed in the prophets really well. Like, this is where the prophets, both ancient and modern, serve us. So let's take a look at Hosea 4, which is a really penetratingly insightful verse. So Hosea 4, 1-3. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites. And I will add, and Vancouverites, and Surreyites, and Canadianites, and whatever your context is. Hear the word of the Lord. Because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. Right? There's that Genesis 1 intimacy with God relationship. Then it moves on to the human dimension. There's only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. It's really stark. It's brutally stark. And yet we see this in the world around us all the time, right? We deceive one another out of selfish motive or fear. We make a way for ourselves out of selfish ambition, and this has real consequences in the condition of other women and men that we're in relationship with. And then Hosea 4:3, because of this, the broken relationships with God, that broken trust, the ways that we deceive and harm ourselves in our sin, because of this, the verse says, the land mourns and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea are dying. This is a stunningly ecological verse written thousands of years before the term ecology kind of got coined in our modern science kind of lexicon. And although it's brutally stark, like the prophets, it's not stark in order to destroy us, this penetrating word. It's meant to scour us, yes, but with the intent of cleanliness. So I think the analogy I often think of for those of us that like to sail, and if you've ever had the chance to sail in a wooden boat or on a tall ship, like over time, barnacles and seaweed adhere to the hull of the boat, and given long enough, that can literally slow the boat down and also cause like structural damage. So you have to pull out the boat from time to time into dry dock and do the hard work of scraping off all of that accumulated detritus and junk. The goal being not to destroy the boat, the goal being to scour it clean, which is hard work, so that all that layers of grime, and to carry through the analogy, those layers of sin, those practices and attitudes and systems that are actively countering God's good intent, get scraped away. The prophets are the best at this, I think. And like I said, both ancient, in Hosea's case, and modern. We have modern prophets, if you will, artists and ecologists and pastors and biologists that in our time are reminding us that species extinction, plastics addiction, changing climate and increasing climate extremes are at the root because too many of us are seeking to fill the void within with the gods, small g, of consumption and escapism. Well, how do we respond to this kind of stark word that's meant to kind of cleanse and heal? One way is to buckle down with like mandates and law and enforcement, right? And we see that in the world around us all the time. Peter Harris, who's a Rocha's initial founder and Anglican minister, reminded me once that Christians and those that would call themselves kind of passionate environmentalists actually share a really similar story. And so we should have lots of empathy for each other, right? And here's how the story goes. Creation, the world, the earth, is good. It's so, so good. Genesis 1. And then humanity happens, Genesis 3, the rebellion. And look at the tremendous mess that we've made. And one answer, whether we're in religious communities or whether we're in environmental communities or somewhere in between, one answer then, in answer to the mess we've made, is to go the legalism route. Do this, don't do that, and we're going to measure and weigh who's doing what, who's driving what, who's eating what kind of energy we're using. And that can quickly devolve into judgmentalism and kind of a credit debit ledger. And we in the church should know that we know this really well, how petty and kind of soul eroding that can get. It is not a path to freedom. But there is another path beyond law, beyond legalism, and we have some amazing guides to guide us in this narrow way that leads to freedom. So at least for me, and I would hold out to you today, Paul does this so well, the Apostle Paul. Paul, of any man in the New Testament, knows firsthand how polluted religious zealousness and legalism can be. Right? Here's a man that pursued and persecuted, imprisoned and beat the early disciples of Jesus in the name of God, in the name of law. But Paul, that same man, so full of self-righteous rage, and we're surrounded by people in our day, burdened with care for the earth, that are filled with self-righteous rage. But Paul became the man who wrote these words. And let's look at Romans 8. I'm going to get emotional here because the freedom that comes through here from ones that used to be so bound up in self-righteousness and legalism, it's just so freeing. It just bears witness to me, and I hope to you. So here's Romans 8:15. Here's Paul, the formerly self-righteous one. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. And he's referencing the law, like fear of the law, fear of that kind of judgment. Rather, the Spirit we received brought about your adoption as children. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we're children, then we are heirs. Heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. This is us, folks. Paul's speaking to us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. What's one of the general themes linking that stark Hosea passage that I read earlier and this passage of Paul in the letter to the Romans? The theme is the power of relationship and how our primary relationships have implications that affect everything around us. Hosea frames it in the negative, right? There's no trust of God. And if you're not going to trust God to kind of be for you, to be your provider and your generous creator, then who's going to look out for us, right? Well, our age is surrounded by this, our time, and it's us. I'll make a way for myself. And when I'm stuck in that tyranny of selfishness, self-identity, self-autonomy, making a way in the world, the relational breakdown for other people and creation is just manifest all around us. And sometimes it feels as though we're stuck here. But we are not. And this is what Paul reminds us. We are not stuck. God is acting in history. God is acting now in my life, in your life, around us, in the world, ceaselessly, lovingly, powerfully, to rescue us from selfishness and to remind us who we are. And Paul proclaims this with such joy because he knows how crushing legislation can be. And he knows that we cannot legislate compassion. Virtues, if you will, which is, I think, simply the Holy Spirit's presence and gifts within us. Virtues are formed in freedom. You cannot enforce virtue by law. And I really want to stress this point because in our fix-it culture that worships efficiency and instant solutions, it's so easy for us to, even in the church, it's so easy for us to jump to what should we do? And leaping to what should we do can quickly go to legalism. And we've got to stay grounded. We have to remember who we are constantly. This is why our faith communities are so important, because they hold us together in this biblical vision of real reality. And our faith communities hold us in that the biblical story and the Holy Spirit are the primary shapers of our identity. And we get reminded together of who we are. Are we slaves to sin and selfishness? No. Paul says clearly, we are not. Are we alone in this? No, we are not. Are we a part of a family of God's making? Yes. Are we adopted as children of a loving Creator and Father? Yes. And as children, are we heirs? Paul says co-heirs with Christ, given gifts and power and authority and freedom and a future. A future that we see that John reveals in his letter, Revelation, that involves heaven, the fullness of God's presence, coming down and incarnating in fullness on all of the earth. And we're to live into that future in the here and now and be a blessing onto the earth. God's Spirit in us blessing all things, quite frankly, the implications of that are they're beyond imagining. They're hard to imagine. But Paul does an incredible job of trying in Romans and in Colossians 1. I would commend that to you. All things, being healed and reconciled and saved in Christ. Peter in 1st and 2nd Peter, those letters, does an incredible job casting an imagination at the scope of what God's on about. The Christian hope, the biblical story's hope, is not escape. It's being a blessing now with an incarnated hope that in Christ, in the fullness of time, all will be well. This is our call. And it's not idealistic. I want to stress this. It's realistic. It's the way of Jesus. It's the way the Spirit works. And it will involve suffering. Paul's writing from prison in Romans, right? So he's in prison, in chains, praying for his prison guards and writing about all of creation being redeemed and brought into the freedom of the children of God. Suffering and great joy held the intention right in Paul in the midst of that. So today, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the weight of brokenness in the world, if you're feeling weighed down by a loved one's physical suffering or addiction or mental health crisis, if you feel brokenhearted over mass extinctions, over heat domes this last summer that killed some of the most vulnerable in our midst. And we know these things are due to sin. If you're carrying sadness because you know deep in your gut that this is not the way things were meant to be, if we choose to hold that kind of suffering with Jesus and we groan with the Spirit, that's where the Romans passage goes, then let me commend to you that the Spirit of God is active and present within you, and that should bring hope. Ironically, that kind of lament, this kind of holy hurting for the world, is not due to lack of faith. It can be a sign of the presence of God in us. It's the Spirit within us groaning and yearning for wholeness. And out of that prayerful kind of groaning and mess at times, that fierce and joyful insistence that something needs to be different, that is the birthplace of mission. That's where we're heirs with Christ, participating in the Spirit, looking for ways of cooperating with God and the world around us. So in our concluding minutes, I want to consider some of what we can do, but again, out of our identity, out of who we are, the family of God. So I want to ask some questions that I hope might inspire Spirit-led creation care. So many places, churches, different parachurch ministries, community organizations, when I go, their first question is always, so what do we do? And I want to resist that in part because I'm not the best person to ask. I don't know your particular context, but the Spirit does. And I know that creation is groaning and in need of the freedom of the children of God. I don't know how God has uniquely gifted your faith community or you personally, but the Spirit does. And I know that you, an individual, and you in your community, corporate, are full of gifts. And that there are ways of using them in seasons to come that will bless broken places and broken people. And I don't know how your congregation or faith community or ministry is suffering, but the Spirit does. And I know that when suffering is held with the Spirit, and we walk in faith and look for ways that God's power might flow out of the very areas we feel most weak in, that's exactly sometimes where the breaking in of God's kingdom starts to take root and manifest in amazing ways. So I simply want to close with a few questions to pose to you and a few suggestions and maybe a story. So let me ask a few questions just to prompt our imaginations and hopefully spur some conversation in the chat and hopefully in small groups that you join over MissionCentral over the weekend. Question 1. How are we making space together to listen for the Spirit's counsel in this regard? I really want to highlight this. This is not an individual affair. Creation care, the state of the planet, and a deep desire to bring Spirit's blessings and gifts into the scale of brokenness that we're facing right now, it is far too daunting to go solo. It's not a solo journey. That's just exhausting. And I've personally experienced it. I've met so many exhausted, dear people along the way. It's got to be done in community, and that's. I mean, I know I'm literally preaching to the choir here, probably in some ways, but that's why I'm part of a Rocha. That's why I have so much hope in the people of God taking this on together in all our various communities. So how are we making space to listen for the Spirit's counsel in this? Are we a part of faith communities that are holding this kind of vision, this from the biblical story, and with grounds for hope in what God is doing? And don't hear me if you're struggling in your church community because it's not holding out hope for the world and it's a little bit more of an escapist affair looking to the future. Don't hear this as grounds to leave your church community. Hear this from a pastor's heart of an invitation perhaps for the Spirit to have you participate and hold that kind of vision within your faith community and look for partners along the way. Question 2. Is there a unique challenge facing your particular part of creation that's in your neighborhood, in your parish, in your watershed? Are there those today, even here, that might be feeling a particular tug of the Spirit to engage that particular kind of creation groaning? If you are feeling that tug, you need to share that with your community, with your friends. You need to share your heart, and I would really invite you to take the next step. And maybe that looks like reaching out to a Rocha for some encouragement and mentoring and community along the way. But if you're part of a church or a camp or a ministry organization that has land or grounds, are the grounds that you're on, does it have more diversity of plant species and animal species because of your presence there? Or less? And I don't ask that to be guilt-inducing. I ask that to prompt our imaginations, because this can be fun. During coffee time, after church or before Sunday school, whenever you guys sit and meet each other, and I guess there's less of that with the pandemic, but we're getting back there. Over coffee time, are you drinking fair trade coffee, where the people growing it in a lot of developing contexts are being paid a really fair wage, a just wage? Or are you drinking coffee from subsistence farmers that are barely making it and reliant on nonprofit charities for sustenance? Janitorial staff, cleaning staff in your buildings, in your spaces, are they cleaning with products that are damaging to themselves or damaging to groundwater? I had a call last night from a contractor that Rocha is engaged with, who on another contract was doing some spraying with a really potent paint in a warehouse. I'm not going to mention where. And ended up with VOC paint poisoning over the Christmas break, and was with nosebleeds and fevers and mild seizures because he was using products that we really have no business using at least without proper safeguards. Again, I'm not asking this to induce guilt. I'm asking this to prompt our imaginations, because this can take so many different shapes in our congregations, in our spaces. How about this question? Do local First Nations peoples, local conservation groups, farmers, outdoor schools, teachers that do a lot of things outside, that are around your community of faith, do they view you as an ally, or do they view you as an obstacle as a Christian community? Or do they even know you're there? that might be another part of the question. Some questions to prompt thought. Let me illustrate this with a quick story from one of our international projects. Rocha is at work in Lebanon. We have a Lebanese team. And in the context in Lebanon, in the early 90s, we were working in the Bekaa Valley, where there's these abundant wetlands that are mostly on large-scale private properties, often that have been owned for generations by family groups. One of the most popular recreational pastimes, if not the most popular recreational pastime in this particular area of Lebanon, is hunting for birds. But in this particular area, the Bekaa Valley is a fantastically important migratory flyway for birds coming out of Africa and up into the northern hemisphere in summer for feeding. They funnel through Lebanon, so there's lots of birds, but it's because of the food sources there. So a Rocha staff in the 90s are out at 4 a.m. doing species counts for species at risk and migrating birds, and just in awe of the number and the diversity and, naming and tending and keeping as act of worship. And as they were leaving the bird counts at 6 a.m., they're leaving the wetlands, and neighbors of a Rocha staff are walking in with shotguns and nets and bags, and they can hear the shotguns starting to go off. So what does it look like to be a Christian witness, a Christian community in that context? The spirit is groaning, I would argue. Their hearts are groaning. What's the response? Well, one response, obviously, is some kind of violent confrontation. But is that a response that is going to be blessed by the Spirit? I think we could all agree together, likely not. A more dangerous response in the hearts of a Rocha staff is one of contempt, I think, for neighbors, for the local community members. But again, I would hold out that this is not of the way of the Spirit. So they prayed, and they took counsel, and they met with neighbors, and they met with multi-generational landowners. And over time, what emerged was running school programs and doing excellent science education for school children in villages and cities and towns in the Bekaa Valley. Just doing good environmental education and science education. Becoming friends and neighbors and settling in for the long haul. And 15 and 20 years on, after this long obedience following the Spirit's direction, now we're engaging landowners in Lebanon. The children are grown up and have taken ownership and have some authority within their families around these wetlands and areas. And there is a growing understanding of how diverse and rare and important that particular habitat is for bird species through that whole area of the world. And land use and hunting is starting to look different. But this is a whole generation's cycling through. This is neighbor making over the long haul. This is Christian witness joyfully worked out in a kind of suffering over the long haul, and it is producing fruit. And the Bekaa Valley in this particular area with these landowners is looking like more species, more plants. It's flourishing. It's a window into shalom, if you will. I think I'll close with this before we go to the chat. In the autumn, COP26 happened, which for those that don't track with these things, maybe like we do, this is a huge gathering of the world's elite. So these are world leaders, political, economic, gathering in Glasgow, trying to grapple with complex issues around climate change. And to be honest, most of the headlines coming out of that gathering was about kind of the amount of noise that conference goers were making more than the courageous steps that world leaders were taking. So I want to put it to you today that as with so many movements in history, it is not going to be the most wealthy and the most powerful that turn the tide on creation care in this particular instance, climate change. And I'm glad Rocha had a presence there. I'm glad we were there. We need to engage power structures. But ultimately, it's not going to be the most powerful down that are going to turn the tide. It is going to be millions and millions of faithful, joyful, humble creation care steps made by people struggling to make ends meet, struggling to know what to do, but wanting to do something. It's going to be our stories as we place them into the larger story of God, our Creator, as we love God and love creation. So amen. I'd invite us to continue considering this. And I'll extend to you a warm invitation to look up Rocha, just rocha.ca. Check out our website. This is an open invitation for those ever in the Lower Mainland, Metro Vancouver area, whether you're traveling here from abroad, to come and visit us here in Surrey at the Rocha site. You can navigate through our website to find out information on how to get a hold of me or us. And we have teams in Northern BC, in Houston, BC, in Manitoba, and in Ontario as well. So ample opportunity to get to know Rocha and to participate with us, in extending this kind of hope in our world, in our time, and glorifying God in the meantime. Peace to you, and thanks so much for joining today. Let's go into some of our questions and answers.
You believe in the importance of the air we breathe, of the natural space around you, the water we drink, homes for every creature.
Not just for you, but for all those around you and those who will come after you. You have an important role to play, not just in taking action for the planet today, but in healing it for the future.
Help us monitor at-risk species. Raise up the next generation who will restore the natural world. Connect more people to creation.
Because the more we experience, the more we love. The more we love, the more action we take. You are more important than you think.
Let's make an impact together.